Hello. So, okay. So, the two dysfunctions that I chose to discuss um, are female sexual interest and or arousal disorder and male hypoactive sexual desire disorder. The reason I chose these two were is because they're fairly similar. So not only were they easier to kind of research, but as I was going through kind of each bullet point for this assignment, kind of found myself comparing one to the other, and I may be a little biased in this assignment towards, I guess, the female aspect of both of these, to be honest. And I don't really know, what I'm trying to argue with this, but it's kind of just the way, the assignment fell because of these two dysfunctions and their similarities and major differences. So bear with me, but here we go. So female sexual interest and or arousal disorder, according to the DSM-5, is the lack of or significantly reduced sexual interest and arousal, or arousal. And you, as a female who may be experiencing sexual disinterest or a lack in arousal sexually, in order to be diagnosed with FSIAD, you have to meet three criteria that span over a period of 6 months. And it's 3 out of 6. So with this dysfunction, you have to meet three of the 6. Here it's absent or reduced interest in sexual activity, absent or reduced sexual or erotic thoughts or fantasies, no or reduced initiation of sexual activity, and typically unreceptive to a partner's attempts to initiate. Absent or reduced sexual excitement or pleasure during sexual activity in almost all or all, approximately 75 to 100% sexual encounters in identified situational context, or if generalized, in all context. Absent or reduced sexual interest or arousal in response to any internal or external sexual or erotic cues, such as written, verbal, or visual, and absent or reduced genital or non-genital sensations during sexual activity in almost all or all, which is approximately 75 to 100%, sexual encounters in identified situational contexts, or if generalized, in all contexts. And again, this is to have a persistence of a minimum of 6 month span. And I just read that directly from the DSM-5. So, male hypoactive sexual desire disorder, according to the DSM-5, is persistently or recurrently deficient or absent sexual or erotic thoughts or fantasies and desire for sexual activity. That's it. There's no criteria to meet. That's it for male hypoactive sexual desire disorder. So when I first went through the readings and learned about female sexual interest arousal disorder, my initial thought was, could that be me? that's kind of, where I'm at in my life, and just really no interest. But as you go through, it's kind of more, there's a little more to it than just, lack of interest. It outlines, again, 3 of 6 criteria to meet. And while I wish I could attribute, where I'm at with my life in this area to just a lack of interest, I would not be able to be diagnosed with FSIAD. Anyway, I digress. I think that this disorder is broad and very generalized. Just overall, in all of the readings that we've been assigned and have read, not a lot known about the inner workings of the female when it comes to sexuality and sexual experiences, primarily because it is so individualized, and while physically it's pretty standard for all females, I guess the process, from start to finish is not, I guess, I mean, I know from start to finish, it's extremely personal for women, whereas men, they're pretty straightforward, like with the definition of male hypoactive sexual desire disorder. It's just there. That's what it is. And so it's a little bit more concise than female sexual interest and arousal disorder. So that was kind of like my initial reaction to both, not just in researching this for this assignment, but just when I read them back in when I read about them back in weeks 1 and 2, I think it was kind of like, that's it, but it also makes sense. So when it comes to FSIAD, I don't know, I just feel like the authors of the DSM, and I know this is over, what, this is because of what limited studies we have to base this off of, and the limited knowledge that we hold currently about female sexuality. But it just feels like they're kind of grasping at straws to attribute a reason to why women may have a lack of desire or interest in sex. It's kind of like the quote from Seinfeld. I forget where it is referenced, but he more or less says that men are like firemen as women are to fires, pretty much. So men are always ready to go, and women are like fires, where it'll start, it'll happen, a fire will happen, but the conditions have to be just right. And it's true. I mean, in my own experience, and culturally, you kind of hear the jokes about how men, they always think about, that's all they think about is sex. So I think the difference between the two lie more in, I don't know, I think women women experience sex and sexuality more psychologically, and men are more, it's attributed in men more to physiology, the physiological aspect in men. It is, I have to look it up to reference it, but, and now I just forgot what I was going to say. It's a difference in physiology versus psychology when it comes to men and women, I guess, with these disorders. It's a biological response to a psychological something. I'm sorry, I forget where I read it, but that's kind of the general idea. It's sex and sexual experience. It doesn't start physically and end physically. There has to be that desire there and that interest. Not necessarily first, but that's really how we go about it. So I'm just going to try and get back into my notes because I've gone on a complete and utter tangent and nowhere near where I wanted to be right now. But anyway, in Hall's article on male hypoactive sexual desire disorder, she stated that relational distress may be mistaken for sexual distress. And really, I feel like that is also the case for female sexual interest and arousal disorder. Again, these two disorders are extremely similar. The only difference is it's females versus males, and it's how they go about experiencing these sexual experiences and how they're categorized culturally and socially. And I don't know how to pronounce the name, Cacchioni or Cacchioni. They reference a 51-year-old female named Jolene when they're discussing performance work, which is one of three versions of sex work. It's discipline, performance, and avoidance. So Jolene states, I never enjoyed it. Sex is what she means. It's like something I'm supposed to do. Why? Because I'm a woman, and women are expected to. That's how you keep a guy happy. I'm such a good actress. There's also an article stating that women are less likely to orgasm in casual relationships. So the more casual the relationship and the more casual relationships a female has, I feel, the less likely she is to orgasm overall and situationally than if she were in a committed relationship. I guess I'll move on to male hypoactive sexual desire disorder. Like I said, I'm sorry, I am a little bit biased when it comes to female sexual interest and arousal disorder, just because it's just a completely different experience for men and women. Same end goal, but just how we go about it is completely different. When men present for hypoactive sexual desire disorder, sometimes it's tied to erectile or ejaculatory dysfunctions. For example, they could come into therapy because they are having erectile issues, or there's just, or the wife could, take the husband to therapy because their sex life has kind of diminished, and it could be because he does have an erectile dysfunction, which is not so complicated, I feel. That is more physical than psychological and social. Um, the prevalence of male hypoactive sexual desire disorder, depending on which study you go by, is 3 to 41% of the population, or more conservatively, 15 to 25%. So, I don't know. I feel like, we kind of have to figure that out before we kind of go any further with it. Again, Hall states men want to please their partners, and men's desire is often contingent upon the pleasure they are able to give. I mean, why isn't that the same for women? Why does that have to be just men? I feel like, if you're in a committed and loving relationship, it's both ways. Both partners want to please their partner, not just men wanting to please women. And she also states that the difference between desire and motivation is the difference between craving chocolate cake and thinking it's noon, I should have lunch, which I feel is, that's women right there. I mean, not all women, I know, but most women love chocolate cake. Guys like chocolate cake too. I get it. Everybody loves chocolate. But it's kind of like saying, if you were to put the sentence into female sexual interest and arousal disorder, you could say the same thing, but just substitute chocolate cake for wine and dinner time. I don't know, but I get it. The difference between desire and motivation is the difference between chocolate cake and thinking it's noon, I should have lunch. I don't know. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Like I said, I feel like I'm kind of going on a witch hunt for males presenting with hypoactive sexual desire disorder. It's more of a, for me, it's more of a, why are we separating these categories just because it's female versus male? It's just, I don't know. Also, something that I looked into was asexuality, lack of interest. Why could it not be attributed to asexuality? And asexuality is only accounted for in 1% of the general population. I didn't see anything that said it was more men were asexual than females or vice versa. But I mean, maybe asexuality is such a low percentage because it is looked over and misdiagnosed with male hypoactive sexual desire disorder or female sexual interest and arousal disorder. We might be just labeling people who are asexual wrong, and while we do have the best intentions, that may not entirely help our clients who are coming to us with these dysfunctions. So people who do present for these dysfunctions, obviously for either disorder, it would be individual men or women and or couples in which their desire or interest in sexual experiences has waned or completely disappeared altogether. Also, with female sexual interest and arousal disorder, you may get a client who comes of their own accord, and it's discovered that they have had a sexually abusive past, which may be contributing to this lack of desire. For men presenting with hypoactive sexual desire disorder, they could be it could be because they have been diagnosed with a medical condition, in which case, you wouldn't diagnose that man with hypoactive sexual desire disorder because their lack of interest in sex could be attributed to the new medication that they may be on, or treatments that they may be undergoing for this new medical condition. So moving on to part 2. I'm sorry, that was very rambly, and I am over my time, but part 2, so therapist self-care versus general self-care. Therapist self-care is more about getting to know yourself introspectively than kind of just taking care of yourself overall or your general well-being. We're taking our past failures, regrets, pretty much just everything in our past, and looking to undergo self-care as a therapist. What you're looking to do more is turning the negatives in your past into potential strengths that you could use in helping your clients. So for example, I referenced that I was, in an early discussion in this class, I referenced that I was in a sexually abusive relationship. And while that brings its own difficulties and negative ties with it, it would help me to relate to not only women who would be in my similar situation, but having gone through that, I would not be biased toward the women who are being abused. I wouldn't completely shut out the men who are being abusive if they came to therapy as well. My goal in that sense would be more, obviously, to help stop the abuse, or get it to stop somehow in some way. But coming from a place of, or at least trying to understand the abuser, rather than just being like, you should stop. Why are you doing this? Can't you see this is hurting her? So that would be, I guess, an example of therapist self-care. Just be getting to understand yourself, getting to understand your past, so that you can better help the clients in your future, and just better yourself overall in that sense too, because we're human. We hold on to the past. Forgive and forget is not really a thing. We can forgive, but it's really hard to forget. And general self-care is just, your general well-being, your overall care, taking vitamins to keep up your immune system so you don't miss a day of work and you have to reschedule clients, getting your nails done, going to the spa. Those are all like physical situations, but just generally overall, you just want to feel relaxed. So that's more general self-care. The similarities and differences between the two, kind of discussed that. The similarities I feel for general self-care for me personally would be going to therapy before, going through this course. And I've kind of known about self of the therapist, but therapist self-care is a little bit more in depth. And I have been going to therapy, just for my own sake, and that is my general self-care. But going through this and becoming a therapist gets a little bit more in depth with therapist self-care. And the differences really would be going through training for therapist self-care. In the Aponte and Kissil article, they discuss pot training, personal, I forget it. I'm sorry, I'm so spacey. Person of the therapist. I am so sorry. I completely spaced on that. Person of the therapist training, putting ourselves while we're in therapy in the moment, in an as-is situation. Where am I right now in this moment? Like I said, I'm very spacey right now, so I need to work on that. But in therapy, just being aware of yourself and the thoughts and internal reactions that you're having as your clients are opening up to you. That also facilitates empathy and understanding while we're in session. Because, like I said, if I were to have a couple present with an abusive relationship, obviously my initial reaction would be like, okay, how abusive? Like, where's it going? What's happening? Is there hitting? That kind of stuff. That would all be going through my head, but I would also be aware of having been in a similar situation, possibly, and where I am at currently with that. Am I at peace with it? Not looking for the next move. How am I going to respond to this? You're just aware of. It's kind of like meditation. I would feel just they're speaking to you, and you have a thought, and you continue listening. You just kind of let that thought go by, unless it's helping the clients, then unless it's not helping the clients, I would. Oh my God! Wow, I'm so sorry. Unless it is helpful to the client, I would keep it to myself. Keep the thought to myself. And I'm really not the most empathetic, like just naturally. I'm just not the most empathetic person. But going through these courses, I am learning a lot more about myself and about how to be myself, but also not be myself, be more empathetic towards people, whereas I may not be empathetic towards people in the real life, in real life, or I guess not in real life because that is real life, but just in the real world. Anyway, what is necessary for a couple to communicate regarding their sexual relationship? less expectation and more appreciation, I feel. When couples are married, the expectation of sexual relations is there. And the conversation goes from, having fun and being spontaneous to, so we're going to do it tonight? Kind of like what am I getting here? What am I'm expecting this, so am I going to get it or not? And just the more appreciation part is, just appreciating your partner, and being your partner, communicating your fantasies and desires with this person that you love, that you can be vulnerable with, being vulnerable with your partner, because so many of us, we do come with our backstories and our pasts, and there are things that we are hiding that we squish down way deep inside and expect it never to come up, but then you do start to see it the more time you spend with this one person. There's really not much room to hide when you're spending your every waking moment with somebody that you love. And then also, I think effectively communicating with your spouse, how certain situations make you feel. So like a husband, kind of coming on to his wife, like, oh, you look good tonight, the kids are in bed, wink, wink, and then just total dismissal from the wife, not feeling it, or, I would rather sit here and eat popcorn and watch a movie. Just being dismissed like that. If the husband were to be like, hey, that's not cool, you kind of make me feel like you don't want me, or I'm not feeling very desired here. Just kind of facilitating that conversation rather than the husband just getting mad and walking off and the woman just sitting on the couch still, because that's what she wants to do. And like women, we usually tend to do what we want to do because we're women. But kind of discussing in the moment how something, sorry, how that situation makes you feel, rather than brushing it off or stalking off or not discussing it, I think is way better than that. It does facilitate that communication between the two, and that also shows both parties, that they can be open with each other. They can talk about these things. So that will not only lead to a better relationship, but when they do have problems, they know they can go to each other rather than having to go to their friends about each other. And then how much should a therapist's personal experience influence his or her role in therapy? I think in session, your personal experience should be like a wallflower. It's there, you see it, but it's not really bothering anybody. It's not coming into the session. And sometimes your personal experience will be forced into the spotlight. Sometimes you will have to give your own example of certain situations that are similar to your client's situation. But it should be only used as a helping tool rather than a hurting tool, because so much in general conversation, a lot of people will just say, oh, this happened to me, and their friend will turn around and be like, girl, let me tell you about what happened to me. And it's kind of like we're trying to one up each other when it's really not. So, um, it those personal experiences being brought into the session should not be like that. It shouldn't be like, oh, well, let me tell you what happened to me. Let's compare and contrast our situations. No, um, it should be used more, like I said, as a helping tool rather than justifying an individual or a party's um, experience and situation. Yeah. And as a therapist, I don't think I could get very far without personal experiences. I've experienced a lot, and I feel like my experiences, just the knowledge from it, could help people like, I'm not an open book, but I want to be kind of thing. And I think therapy, being a therapist, it would help me not only to understand other people and help other people, but it would also help me understand myself a little bit more. Um, and it really is a big part of why I wanted to become a therapist in the first place. Just having not necessarily a connection with other people, but just knowing that you're not the only one out there that's having certain difficulties, and being able to take what you've been through and everything that you know about what you know, and using that to help other people. I think that's really cool, and would affect my work in a positive way, and hopefully help my clients too. And yeah, I guess that's it. Like I said, if we can, or I don't think I said this, but I just kind of want to sum it up. If we can see ourselves and our clients, then it's easier to be open with them, with others, and with ourselves, and be able to understand and relate to our clients better. And I guess that's all I've got. Sorry it was so rambly, and I hope I hit all of the bullet points. I think I did. So that's it. I'm so sorry I went over time, but thank you so much. Going through this kind of, really opened up my eyes to some things and just kind of made me realize where I'm at with certain things. So, okay, that's it. Thank you.